Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something huge, a bill that could literally rewire India's entire energy future, shifting it away from coal and toward the power of the atom. Okay, let's just take a look at these numbers for a second. India's vision for nuclear power, it's massive. Right now we're looking at about 8 gigawatts from nuclear plants, but the goal by 2047? 100 gigawatts. That's not just a small jump, that's a more than 12-fold leap. So the real question is, how on earth do they plan to get from here to there? All right, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down. We'll look at the problem they're facing, the big new idea to fix it, and of course, the roadblocks that are definitely going to pop up. Let's start with why this is even a thing. So why this sudden massive push for nuclear energy? I mean, what's the big rush? It all really comes down to a fundamental problem at the very heart of India's growth story. For decades, India has run on coal. I mean, it's been the backbone of their energy security. But the country's electricity demand is just exploding, and that's putting incredible pressure on its coal resources. And, with climate change being a very real thing, sticking with coal just isn't a long-term plan. They need something cleaner, something more reliable. But here's the thing, there's a huge problem. The old rulebook, the Atomic Energy Act of 1962, was written for a totally different world. It basically made nuclear power a closed-off, government-only club. No private companies, no outside investment. And that, right there, has become a massive bottleneck, stopping the whole sector from growing up and meeting today's needs. And this is where our story really kicks off. Enter the proposed fix, the Atomic Energy Bill 2025, or as it's better known, the Shanti Bill. Sometimes the name tells you everything you need to know. Shanti isn't just a name, it's an acronym. It stands for Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. It's basically the entire mission statement packed right into the title. So, what's the biggest, most game-changing part of this bill? Well, for the very first time, it's cracking open the door and inviting the private sector in. And this right here is the heart of the new model. For the first time ever, private companies can actually own a big piece of the pie, up to 49% in new nuclear power plants. The idea is pretty simple, right? Bring in that private money, that cutting-edge tech, and that famous private sector efficiency to shake up a system that's been run by the state for decades. But, and this is a really big but, it's a delicate balancing act. While private companies get a seat at the table, the government, through organizations like the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, or NPCIL, holds onto a 51% majority stake. What does that mean? It means they still have the final word on, everything, from safety rules to where the fuel comes from. So you get private investment, but you keep public control over a super sensitive and strategic industry. Okay, so bringing in private money sounds great, but it's not that easy. You can't just ask for billions of dollars without answering a really tough question, especially in nuclear energy. What happens if something goes horribly wrong? And you can't talk about industrial accidents in India without talking about the Bhopal gas tragedy in 1984. The memory of that disaster, where a foreign supplier basically dodged full responsibility, hangs over everything. That's why India's 2010 liability law, which this new Shanti bill doubles down on, is so strict. It says that everyone, including the companies that supply the parts, can be held responsible if their faulty equipment causes an accident. And this creates a huge problem. On one hand, you absolutely want to make sure victims get justice. That's non-negotiable. But on the other hand, a rule this tough might just scare off the big international companies, the very ones whose technology and money India really needs. It's this tricky dance between being accountable and being attractive for investment. Okay, so to really get why things like liability and safety are such a massive deal, we need to take a quick peek under the hood at the incredible technology that powers all of this. It all kicks off with something called nuclear fission. So picture this. A tiny particle, a neutron, smacks into a uranium atom. That atom then splits apart, and when it does, it releases a ton of heat and, you guessed it, more neutrons. Those new neutrons then go and hit other atoms, and the whole thing just keeps going in a chain reaction, generating a mind-boggling amount of power. But all that power is useless, and frankly terrifying, without control. That's where two key parts come in. You've got a moderator, something like heavy water, which India uses a lot, that slows those neutrons down to keep the reaction from going wild. Then you have a coolant, which swoops in, absorbs all that intense heat, uses it to make steam, and that steam spins turbines to make electricity. It's a pretty elegant system, really. Now, you can harness this power in reactors of all shapes and sizes. India has the big traditional ones, for sure. But a huge part of its future plan is all about these things called small modular reactors, or SMRs. The cool thing about them is that they can be mostly built in a factory and then just put together on site. The hope is that this makes them way cheaper, faster, and more flexible to set up. It could be the key to scaling up India's nuclear program like never before. All right, so we've got the new policy, we've got the new tech. Let's put it all together and look at the final piece of this puzzle, the jaw-dropping ambition of India's goals. Just look at these numbers. They tell the whole story. The plan is to get to 22 gigawatts by 2032, and then the big one, 100 gigawatts by 2047. To put that in perspective, if they pull this off, India would blow past the current nuclear output of countries that have been in this game for decades, like China and France. It's a huge statement. And listen, this isn't just some dream on a piece of paper. They're putting their money where their mouth is. The government has already set aside 20,000 crore rupees, that's roughly 2.4 billion US dollars, just to get the first fleet of these new Indian-designed SMRs off the ground. And they expect them to be up and running by 2033. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the plan is incredibly bold. The money is there, the technology is powerful, the Shanti Bill is really the key to unlocking this nuclear future for a cleaner, more energy-secure India. But it all comes down to one critical question. In this incredibly high-stakes game, will the huge rewards of going nuclear ultimately outweigh the very real and very immense risks?